Good evening, everyone, and welcome to King's Community Church. Some housekeeping before we begin. We are not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, please leave the building through the fire exits and meet outside at the fire assembly point. This meeting will be video recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. If any member of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of staff. If you are planning on filming or recording the meeting, then please do let us know so that we can ensure you are not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council's website. We will now go to the first item on the order of proceedings, Mayor's announcements. Agenda item number 1 is Mayor's announcements. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Mayor of Eastleigh, Councillor Adam Manning, and as Mayor, I chair meetings of the full Council. Before we begin the Council meeting, it is customary for the Mayor to give an overview of highlights in the civic calendar. Our last full Council meeting was in May, when I was elected Mayor. My mayoral year began with a packed diary of events to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and it was lovely to attend street parties and celebrations across the borough. Sadly, only a few months later, we were mourning the passing of Her Majesty, and once again looking back on all she had achieved during her incredible reign. Condolence books opened across the borough, and hundreds of residents paid their respects. I am grateful to our parish and town councils and to The Point for the work they did hosting the Books of Condolence, and also to our Eastleigh Borough Council teams who arranged wreath-laying ceremonies and the proclamation for our new king. The Deputy Lieutenant, Hugo Cubitt, wrote to me to thank all our staff who ensured that events were carried out with dignity and respect. During the last few months, we were sad to learn of the passing of Patrick Halifax, who was Mayor of Eastleigh in 1979 and 80, and two past mayors' escort. Roy Sollett, who was escort for Maureen Sollett in 2001 and 2002, and 2017 and 2018, and Roy Jones, who was escort for Bobby Jones in 1994 and 1995. We send our condolences to their families and friends. Perhaps the most welcome news recently was our huge success in winning the overall Council of the Year award from APSE, the Association for Public Service Excellence. The Direct Services team also won the category trophy for Best Transport and Fleet Maintenance Service, and our teams involved in Eastleigh's Afghanistan evacuation response, our transition to alternative fueled vehicles and equipment, This Girl Can Eastleigh, and Plant Eastleigh were all recognised. The award is a testament to the hard work and talent of everyone at Eastleigh Borough Council. I have been enjoying attending events and visiting groups across the borough. I particularly enjoyed the Eastleigh Mela and Eastleigh Pride events, and I will always be delighted to have gone to the Eastleigh Pride. This month, it was an honour to take part in remembrance events and good to see how well attended they were. It was great to see so many people enjoying our Christmas light switch on event in Eastleigh Town Centre earlier this month. Thanks to the many staff and volunteers who make all these events possible. Being Mayor, I have seen the great work that our residents do, and I'd like to remind councillors that nominations are still open for our Citizen of Honour Awards. I was delighted to hear that Sally Garland had been awarded a British Empire Medal in the Queen's Birthday Honours list for her work with Chandler's Ford Help. Flight Lieutenant Matt Ingram from 1216 Air Squadron also recently received the Lord Lieutenant's Award for his dedication in running Eastleigh Air Cadets, and SciChem, the provider of disinfection, sterilisation and decontamination solutions, whose head office is in Chandler's Ford, received the Queen's Award for Enterprise for their work in the international trade category. I congratulate them all on their well-earned success. And if you'll forgive me, I'd also like to congratulate Councillor Malcolm Cross, who celebrated his 75th birthday on the 14th of November. So happy birthday to Malcolm. Now, without further ado, I'd like to ask our Chief Executive if there are any apologies, James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 4 apologies from Councillors Bearder, Buckley, Kinloch and Rich. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, is anybody aware of any other apologies for absence? In that case, if we move on to declarations of interest, in respect of declarations of interest, councillors, you are reminded that you must declare any personal or pecuniary interest in accordance with the Councillors' Code of Conduct and Standing Orders. Do any councillors have any interest to declare? I think that's a no, James. Thank you. Councillors, next we need to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the council meeting held on the 19th of May 2022. May I have a proposer and seconder, please? Proposer Keith and seconder Councillor Corbyn. Are there any questions regarding the accuracy of the minutes? In that case, is there any debate? In that case, all those for? Any against? And any abstentions? 1 abstention.
That's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next, councillors, the next item on the agenda is the Leader's Report.
I've been given a microphone up here. I think I ought to try and use it, really. I was going to talk about Council of the Year a little bit, Mr. Mayor, but you beat me to it, which is fine, and your prerogative. It's not very often we get to blow our own trumpet about something. I think probably on this occasion, we might even blow our own trombone or blow our own tuba, because it really is a fantastic achievement. So, absolute massive congratulations to all staff, all members of the council, for everything that went into winning that award. I always say that the Eastleigh team is what makes the difference. And we are collectively all a part of that Eastleigh team. So just for the record again, thanks to all staff for absolutely everything that went into winning that award, plus also the service awards and coming up as a runner-up in several other awards too. Really was quite fantastic. Now, Mr. Mayor, it's been 6 months since our last meeting, as you said. 3 Prime Ministers, 4 Home Secretaries, although 2 were the same, 4 Chancellors, 4 Secretaries of State for local government. One of those was the same again too. Now, I could do a little quiz here and ask you to name all those people, but I'm sure you would fail abysmally in trying to, actually James would probably do it, but the rest of us would probably fail abysmally trying to remember. He's struggling now as well. The rest of us probably struggle to make all those add up, and you would probably be as discombobulated as everyone else in trying to work through that list. But it's that turmoil that illustrates the challenges facing local government. After Trussonomics, the highest level of inflation in 40 years, quasi-disastrous mini-budget, and a record jump in interest rates and energy costs that have all compounded the cost of living crisis for residents and for local authorities. So hence the letter sent from the leaders, and the Conservative leaders no less, of Hampshire and Kent county councils to the Secretary of State and to the Chancellor, stating there may come a time in the future where they cannot set a legal budget that balances their finances and meets their statutory obligations to deliver core services. And also asking questions such as, do they need to provide a library service at all? Could they ration more services such as school transport? These are very difficult times. Here in Eastleigh, we have been largely protected over the last 12 years of austerity, thanks to making savings, taking a prudent approach to finance, building up a large interest rate reserve, not using grants such as New Homes Bonus for revenue services, and securing strong long-term income whilst ensuring most borrowing is at fixed long-term rates. And in the process, being able to reduce our council tax in real terms as a share of people's expenditure for 19 years in a row. And I'm pleased to report, despite some of the press reports, that stability remains, as indeed does our council tax commitment. Council tax remains a regressive tax disproportionately paid by people on low incomes. But we do now have a short-term need to make savings, as reported to Cabinet, primarily as a result of inflation, and to a lesser extent by the spike over the next 2 years of interest rates that will remain for that period above their long-term trend. And this likely 2-year bubble of excess costs has required Cabinet and senior staff to look at both our management costs to save £3.5 million, with a new, slimmer senior leadership team, and also some of our services that we will either need to pause provision of, or where we've been backfilling services of other public sector providers that bring to an end. And we very much regret that position, but we do need to be clear. It is a response to the world economic conditions, and in particular, the disastrous period in September and early October this year, when effectively Britain had no real leadership. Now, given our can-do culture, this has not been an easy process for us. And indeed, if you look at many other councils, they've been making significant cuts in public services over the last decade. But we have proceeded at pace, and we'll pull together changes as part of our budget in February. And there will, sadly and inevitably, be some staff leaving the council. Our hope is that the majority of those will be through natural turnover and also by not filling vacant posts. And I want to place on record my thanks to all staff who've responded to the Chief Executive's consultation with their thoughts and ideas so far. And I know James said he'll be in touch with everyone individually who has responded. And that's very much in line with the way our council works. But colleagues, I really don't want to paint a picture totally of despondency. Far from it. Our underlying finances remain exceptionally strong and stand us in very good stead for the future. And it remains a busy time for the council and for our partnership working. As Derek Pretty reports in his cabinet statement, we're working with the Solent LEP and local businesses on the Freeport to help create jobs for the future. We successfully concluded the judicial review into our granted planning approval to secure the future of our airport, so needed for our regional economy. As Tonya Craig reports, we've had a busy summer at our country parks and arts venues, on our health works and sports work programmes, and continue our much needed support for the Afghan resettlement project and the Ukrainian support project too. As Paul Bicknell reports, work will start in the new year for new homes and businesses at the old post office site in Eastern Town Centre, and elsewhere we've let new homes at Bandstand Court and made positive progress with planning at 1 Horton Heath, where work will be able to go ahead with the link road to Allington Lane, with work due to start on new homes next year as well. For our wider environment, we're about to launch a lengthy and open consultation on Stoke Park Farm, now secure in council ownership. We're making land available for nitrate and phosphate mitigation to protect the River Itchen, and will bring forward elsewhere plans for a new solar farm to generate green energy. We're continuing to work with the County Council on how Hampshire can catch up with much of the rest of the country with better doorstep collection of recyclables. So there are a lot of positives, much we can all be proud of, keeping focused on what we can do to improve the quality of lives of Eastleigh residents in these troubled times. So again, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to put on record my thanks to all our staff, all councillors, for their support in making this happen, and a can-do culture for Eastleigh for our future, as we always do. And happy Christmas along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor House. Councillors, are there any questions for the leader? Thank you. In that case, we move on to the next item on the agenda. Councillors, we need to approve a recommendation from the Administration Committee on the 24th of October regarding the Hedge End Town Council Community Governance Review. May I have a mover, please? Councillor House. And is the motion seconded? Councillor Corbyn. Any public participation? And is there any debate? Councillors, we now need to vote. All those in favour, please. All those against? Any abstentions?
I believe that's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, councillors, we now need to approve a number of recommendations from the Administration Committee on the 24th of October regarding the Independent Remuneration Panel's review of councillors' allowances. May I have a mover, please? Thank you. Is the motion seconded? Any public participation? Any debate, councillors? Councillor Parker-Jones.
Thank you. While I'm looking at the allowances, one of the things I raised at the Administration Committee was that I thought that it would be only right and proper that nobody claims more for their mileage than the amount they should be able to claim by taking public transport. I think that would encourage people to use public transport where it's available. It doesn't stop people using their car. It just says that those that do shouldn't receive more money than those that have to pay out for public transport. And I think that that should be included. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker-Jones. Is that an actual motion that you want to make, Councillor Parker-Jones?
Yes, I will move that as a motion that no member should claim more than the cost of public transport to complete the same journey to ensure that we are living our best green lives. Can I have a seconder?
Thank you. Is there any debate on that motion? Councillor House.
Probably easier to speak here during the main part of the meeting. I appreciate the sympathy of the point that Councillor Parker-Jones is making. I think the difficulties are twofold, just instantly thinking about it. Firstly, for most journeys that most councillors make, there simply isn't public transport available. If we lived in a community where you could catch a bus every 5 or 10 minutes to anywhere, that would be a very different prospect, but we don't. And in particular in the evenings, or in particular trying to make journeys from the far south of the borough through to the far north of the borough, or vice versa, public transport simply doesn't exist, so it isn't a viable option. The second point is that that could actually create a bigger cost. For some journeys, the public transport cost would be bigger than the mileage claim. So I think there's a counterintuitive point there. We have, over many, many years, like every other council in the country, I suspect, maybe apart from Brighton, pegged our mileage rates at the HMRC approved rate. And the HMRC approved rate is designed on the basis that you don't make a profit. Because if you're using your own car, it's not just the petrol, it's the wear and tear on the vehicle and everything else alongside it. And the government have fixed the HMRC rate now for over 10 years. So given the increasing fuel costs over that period, the reality is that the HMRC rate doesn't actually cover real costs. So I appreciate the point that Councillor Parker-Jones is making, but the simple reality is it doesn't add up. There's an underlying point to the allowances scheme, which I think is probably worth making at this point, which is that we have, for a long, long time, pegged our allowances to match those that are paid to staff. That way we have a clear set of transparency that we're not doing more, we're not doing less, we're not trying to fiddle around with it because it's convenient one year or the other. We peg the processes exactly in line with the staff. And that gives a clear simplicity and avoidance of the "you're setting your own allowances" accusation that's sometimes made. In some ways, it would be far better if this was entirely a national scheme. It isn't. Every council has its own structures that are quite different. So the package that's here, which has been properly independently scrutinised by an independent panel, in fact, we've actually come in less than the independent panel by judging that on balance they have overrated the significance to the council as a whole of the Horton Heath Development Management Committee is good value and it's totally appropriate on that basis. So whilst appreciating the sympathy the points made, I can't recommend that the council accepts Councillor Parker-Jones's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor House. Is there any further debate on Councillor Parker-Jones' amendment? Councillor Tyson-Payne, please.
So I appreciate that there isn't public transport available at all times, but there is public transport available at some times. So we could have it such that where public transport is available. So there are sometimes meetings during the day when public transport is available. And on a second point, this isn't about cost. This is about the green climate agenda rather than cost. I appreciate that we're keeping it in line with the government or general availability, but that's not about cost because it doesn't really cover the cost anyway, given the recent hike in everything. So 2 points there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson-Payne. Councillor Pragnell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I quite understand why the proposition would be made, and I'm quite sympathetic to it. However, what the proposition doesn't say is how we're going to resource the back office checks of calculating what the public transport would be, actually cost and be able to be claimed, or even if back office checks for finding out if there was public transport available. What I think we probably should do, rather than push this through now, would be to invite the submission for next year so that it can be shown how we can cost and resource any such system before we just commit to it, because we've absolutely no idea. The ratepayer is what we're trying to protect, as well as the environment. We've no idea how much we verbally just spent then.
Thank you, Councillor Pragnell. Any further debate? Councillor Tidbridge, please.
Thank you. I think this motion is a really nice way of ensuring that there is a ceiling on the amount that members would be able to claim for a journey, as opposed to setting the actual amount. It sets a ceiling. I think that's an important thing to note within it. I really wish I lived somewhere with better public transport. Public transport here is appalling, as it is for many towns outside of London. And it would be great if we lived in a location with acceptable, usable public transport, and we don't at the moment. But this council has it within its gift to encourage those that can use public transport to do so, and this amendment to the motion would be a neat way of doing so. It also might help to encourage the council to plan locations for meetings that are accessible by public transport, which I think would be a nice move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tidbridge. Councillor Craig, please.
Yeah, just a slight concern that this would cause equality and discrimination for some people that would actually like to stand as a councillor. For example, I do not have any public transport around where I live. It would take me a lot longer to walk to the nearest bus stop, train station, etc., to use public transport, which would actually probably mean that an extra hour on travelling to and from meetings. So it would actually have stopped me deciding to be a councillor. So I would just err on the equality on people actually wanting to stand and represent their residents.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Any further debate? Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little bit confused, if I'm honest, Councillor Parker-Jones. I thought the proposal would be that using your car, you wouldn't claim the 45 pence mileage, but you would claim a bus fare. That seems, we've now gone off and talking about local transport and links. I think it's a little bit convoluted and a little bit confusing to know exactly what we're being asked to consider. I don't tend to claim the mileage. If I had to find out what the bus fare would be, I just think this is really confusing. We have a very simple policy here, which most importantly aligns to staff. And if we change the council and members' ability to claim, the message then to staff is that we do the same with the staff. Is that what we're suggesting? I think there are far too many holes in this proposal. I couldn't support it. This seems to me, for very small numbers generally, that we're talking about in terms of mileage, quite a convoluted and unnecessary change to what is actually an accepted HMRC system. So I won't be supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbyn. Councillor Bicknell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't support the motion proposed by Councillor Parker-Jones because of whilst the intention may be well intended, there are too many pitfalls with it. For a start, we would then be taking councillors away from the alignment of staff that we have at the moment, whereas councillors and staff, we claim the same. It's already been mentioned that this is a recognised HMRC scheme and the prices and what have you. But also the public transport doesn't and wouldn't necessarily work because you've got the issues of reliability, especially with something I know about, reliability on the trains. Some of the meetings that we actually have to attend to are public recorded meetings, such as this. And if you don't make this meeting, it could affect your attendance, which actually in itself could actually affect you being a councillor if you had, for a number of reasons, not been able to attend for 6 months. Also, LAC meetings, for instance, although probably less of an issue, there are certain things, if you're not there at the beginning, you can't participate in. So the unreliability of public transport, whether it be trains, buses or taxis, and what have you, would actually, I feel, put councillors more at risk of being able to attend meetings on time, or they would have to leave in so much time before the meeting started that actually it would be going back to some of the, picking up some of the things that Councillor Craig said about disability and people deciding whether or not they actually wanted to be a councillor, etc., etc. I mean, again, like Councillor Corbyn, I don't claim any mileage. As a matter of fact, my expenses claimed to the council in 11 years is a very round figure. It is 0. Councillors don't have to claim their mileage if they don't want to. I understand those that do, but some of us don't. But for public transport, which per mile would probably be more expensive than the car anyway, and the diesel bus is certainly not as environmentally friendly as the car I drive, then for all those reasons, whilst it might be, as I say, maybe well intended, I wouldn't, I can't support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bicknell. Councillor Garton, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In an ideal world, yes, using public transport would be amazing, but this isn't an ideal world, and as we all know, subsidies have been withdrawn for a lot of the routes in and around Eastleigh Borough. I myself would probably have to, as been mentioned before, would have to leave really early to get anywhere, and especially at night. Some meetings are late in the evening, and personally, I wouldn't feel safe, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here who would have to go use public transport on their own at night would not feel safe, and it would be safer to use their own transport. So if it was an ideal world, as I said, it would be great to use public transport, but it isn't. And plus the fact I would probably have no idea how much it would cost for me to use the bus anyway. So yeah, and a lot of us now have electric cars, so it's been mentioned about green economy, and a lot of people now have hybrid and electric cars, so surely that's a lot better than using the bus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. Councillor Holes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't support it, unfortunately. I've done some quick maths along with my colleague here. From our part of the borough, to catch a bus into Eastleigh Town Centre, it works out at about £4, and it takes around about 35 minutes. That's about 7 miles. So if you work that out at 45p, 50p a mile through the allowance scheme, it's around about £3.50. So you're actually saving 50p by taking your car, and it's quicker. A train is, and also it's only twice a day. So it's very impractical for attending meetings. And it's the same with the train. Train's even longer, and it takes even, and because it goes further, because it has to go in a big roundabout way. There's no direct route, and it's a lot more expensive than the bus. I think the issue here is actually, for local journeys, it's cheaper to take the car. Whatever the green issues are, and we all support those, for local journeys, your mileage allowance is going to be less than the bus fare or the train fare. For journeys outside the borough, that is a whole different thing, because it depends how far you're going and what form of transport you're using. And it may well be, if you were going to be claiming for doing council business outside the borough, that a train journey would actually work out cheaper than the mileage allowance. It might not, I don't know, I can't do the maths, it's too much to do at this short period. But somebody might know who does regular journeys outside the borough for council business. I think it's too complicated. I think the system that we have in front of us is much more simple. It's basically what every council, I think, is doing. So let's keep it simple. Let's not complicate it. And from my own point of view, I haven't claimed mileage allowance for attending meetings since it turned electronic because I struggled to get it to work. And basically, since COVID, I haven't needed to because any meetings I attend tend to be no further than Hedge End. And that's not very far from my house. I could walk here if I wanted to. It might take me an hour, but I'd get here. So for my own personal reasons, I don't think it's necessary to complicate the system.
Thank you, Councillor Holes. Councillor Kell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things from me, really, and I've listened to all the comments and that everyone has said up so far. I understand the sentiment of what's being put here, but the reality is that it just wouldn't work. And the reasons are a number of them. From a personal perspective, I wish it were that council allowances were high enough that I don't actually have to have another job. But that's not the case. And albeit that I'm on 2 councils, as many will know, that do pay a remuneration, I quite often have meetings in the county council in the morning. They don't have theirs in the evening, very inconvenient for members of the public to attend, mostly. But I quite often have to be at meetings at 10 o'clock in Winchester. Yes, there is public transport to get there, but then I have to leave usually about 12:15, something like that, because I actually have to be at work at 1 o'clock in Eastleigh. And then I have to be there literally working at that time. It's not one of these flexi things or anything. I have to do that. And then quite often, the meetings piggyback each other, Eastleigh and Winchester. So I therefore have to leave work at 6 o'clock and get to a meeting at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in Eastleigh, or somewhere else in the borough. And the reality is if I were to then have to think about how I would get public transport from Hedge End through to Winchester, then back to Eastleigh, and then to another part of Eastleigh or another part of the borough, and then home again, it just wouldn't work. It would be ridiculous. And the cost as well would be astronomical, to be perfectly honest with you, and totally impractical. If it were the case that councillors' allowances were, and I know it's been through an independent remuneration panel, but if they were of a standard, even both councils, that it would mean that you had a sustainable income, then possibly life might be a bit easier. But the problem is with this country is that we don't have a sustainable transport system. We don't have a system that works together, as much as I know that quite a lot of these companies are trying to work together to get a more joined up approach to public transport. It just never has worked because you've got competing private interests and competition rules. So the situation, I've seen people, standing at bus stops, not knowing when a bus is going to arrive, which company is going to be arriving first, which is the quicker bus, which is the quicker train, and then you look at all of the strike action that we've had on the railways, etc., and the strike action that's being proposed. How you can then plan the fact that you have to travel. Our borough is not like Southampton, it's not like some of the other, like Portsmouth, etc., but how you would then plan multi-meetings within a day or within a week, trying to use an unsustainable transport system that's not connected with each other is just impossible. I mean, quite often you can claim mileage if you're doing councillor work within your ward. Well, my ward goes from the west of Botley, which is, you could say, borders on part of Hedge End, right the way up to the northern part of Borley Park, which is very poorly serviced by local transport. In fact, we've had to fight tooth and nail to get a bus to go through the Borley Park estate. So the fact is, how would I then actually even get to residents who want to see me about issues in Borley Park if I can't even get there through public transport? Getting here this evening, finish work at 6 o'clock, I've got to be sat in a meeting at 7 o'clock. I understand the sentiments, but the practicality, if we had a proper integrated system, transport system in this country, which was cheap and reliable, integrated with other services, then I would be far more sympathetic to it. And yes, it is the ideal model, and perhaps we should be lobbying government ministers to actually make sure they do more about it, rather than looking at which is good work that they've done in the metros like Manchester and things like that, that they should have a proper integrated and cheap and reliable service. Because if it was easier to take public transport, believe me, I would use it. But it isn't. That is the reality, I'm afraid, that we are saddled with. And until some sea change happens in this country, where we have such a system, unfortunately, we are, I'm afraid, going to be car dependent into into the future. What we should be pushing is more electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, hydrogen if it comes along, if that's the better option, and making sure it's actually cheaper for people to actually buy these vehicles rather than just driving around in gas-guzzling, polluting vehicles all on our own.
Thank you, Councillor Curl. Any further debate, councillors? Councillor Gomer.
Thank you. I actually think the principle of the suggestion is spot on. I think the fact it includes a ceiling, a sense of viability is completely right. I think actually every organisation should have rules to encourage use of trains and buses over cars as an important part of reducing emissions and congestion and general pollution. But I think actually what this illustrates is how, how difficult it is to make good policy. And so for that reason, I couldn't support the motion tonight, but we'll come to a potential way forward in a second. I think I have research interests in transport design, professionally, specifically around connected and autonomous transport, but clearly that picks up the current transport system as well. I think Councillor Garton and Councillor Craig picked up on two specific issues around safety or perceived safety of public transport, and Councillor Craig more specifically around EDI. We know that people's propensity to use public transport is not uniform. In particular, it's quite particularly gendered, which I think does open up some equity and accessibility challenges around a policy like this. It's not even so simple just as making reasonable adjustments for disability, because of things like gender or ethnicity concerns around being in public spaces perhaps after dark, and that's well supported in the literature. I think these actually are surmountable with a well-written, well-drafted, detailed policy, but I think that detail needs to be worked through, because I think faced tonight, we can't actually judge if it would be workable to implement this policy. And secondly, actually, I think such a policy probably should extend to staff, and I think we need to work out what that would look like. I'd suggest, therefore, that actually this needs to go for a bit of work and consideration in an appropriate venue, which is probably not full council, and that if it seems viable, it either be action by Cabinet or it come back later, but I can't support it quite tonight as much as I like the principle.
Thank you, Councillor Gomer. Any further debate, councillors? Councillor Marsh, please.
I'd like to say that I completely agree with Councillor Gomer. I really do like the principle of doing something to make a difference. We've declared a climate emergency, and sitting back and doing nothing is not acceptable. While I can't support this tonight for various reasons, I do agree that some work needs to be done around this. So although using public transport, many people have spoken about why that's not viable or feasible, I think the council needs to be looking at this and developing policies both for staff and for councillors, for everyone concerned, about how we do address the climate emergency and look at alternative methods of transport that make sure that we're thinking in a more green way. So I can't support it tonight, but I certainly think some work needs to be done around the policy.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Any further debate, councillors? In that case, Councillor Craig.
Just make one point.
Sorry, Councillor Craig, I understand you've already spoken, so...
I have. It was just one point, though. We're asking to do some work around transport. Transport isn't within Eastleigh Borough's gift. So, I would be adverse to getting our staff to do a lot of work behind the scenes on something that isn't in our gift.
So I think in that case, if we can move on to Councillor Parker-Jones as the proposer of the amendment, please.
Thank you. Firstly, I think I must be Superwoman because I don't drive and I have to get to lots of meetings all over the place as well. Maybe I should start lobbying for a car or maybe to be taught to drive. I've never asked anybody to take public transport. That was not my proposal. My proposal didn't say, get out of your cars and onto trains and buses or walk or cycle. My proposal was to set a maximum figure that could be claimed by using a private vehicle. A ceiling, as Councillor Tidridge so eloquently put. I can see that this possibly does need additional work, absolutely. I think that we have declared an environment emergency and we need to start being honest. Are we actually living what we say we are doing? Nobody here was being asked to give up their private motor car. Not one person. What I was saying was, if the cost of using your car was going to cost more than taking public transport, that should be the ceiling. I do welcome the suggestion from Councillor Goma that this should be worked up further. I'd really like to work with Councillor Goma on that, because I can tell that this is not going to succeed and that actually people are far more concerned about their cars than our environment.
Thank you, Councillor Parker-Jones. Councillor House, as the proposer of the motion, please respond.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think, I don't know why Councillor Parker-Jones tries to put words into people's mouths. I don't think anyone spoke in favour of using their cars in favour as opposed to public transport if public transport was viable. And I'm sure that the vast majority of councillors, common sense prevails with a lot of these things. I occasionally have to represent the council at meetings in London. It would never occur to me to drive to London when there's a decent train service the vast majority of the time. It'd be utterly bonkers to do anything other than use the train, then use a bus at the other end, or what I typically do is walk at the other end, because it's actually healthier to walk than use the bus. So common sense, colleagues, needs to have some bearing on what we're talking about here. I think there's always the risk of dealing with policy motions that are put on the hoof, is you get into Liz Truss territory of the unintended consequences, and that's really what's in front of us this evening. The idea of saying, please encourage people to use public transport, absolutely spot on. And I'm sure the vast majority of us do when we can. But coming up with a bureaucratic scheme that will be hard to police doesn't seem to me to be terribly clever or practical at all for the relatively small sums that will be involved in either direction, whether that turned out to be more or turned out to be less. There is a ceiling in place. The ceiling is the nationally approved HMRC rate for transport costs for using private vehicles. Very simple, totally accountable, totally transparent. I urge colleagues not to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor House. Councillors, we now come to the vote on the amendment, please. So all those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions?
The amendment falls, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In that case, is there any further debate on the substantive motion? In that case, if we have a vote on the motion, please. All those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining?
It's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now, councillors, we come on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the appointment to the Audit and Committee. We need to approve the appointment of Councillor Attrell in place of Councillor Buckley on the Audit and Resources Committee for the remainder of the municipal year. May I have a mover, please? Councillor House, and a seconder, please. Councillor Park. Any debate? In that case, we need to vote. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions?
I believe that's unanimous, Mr. Mayor. Don't know what the beep was, so sorry.
Thank you. Now, councillors, the next item on the agenda is the local pay policy statement. May I have a mover, please?
I move, Mr. Mayor, and in moving, just to note, this is a statutory paper which comes before us once a year. There are no surprises hidden in this. It's a simple matter of transparency on local pay policy.
Thank you, Councillor House. Is the motion seconded? Councillor Corbyn. Any public participation? Any debate, councillors? In that case, we need to vote. All those in favour, please. All those against? Any abstentions?
That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the annual review and updates to the Constitution. May I have a mover, please?
Yeah, move, Mr. Mayor, just noting that this is getting us into the habit of an annual update on the Constitution. It may feel a bit bureaucratic, but it saves an awful lot of work if we do this on a once-a-year basis rather than leave it 10 years, as Joe Castor will I'm sure, validate. And I'd like to thank Joe and the team for all the work on this.
Thank you, Councillor House. Is the motion seconded? Councillor Corbyn? Any public participation? Any debate, councillors? Councillors, we now need to vote. All those in favour, please. All those against? Any abstentions?
It's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next item is the Cabinet Member Statements. Cabinet members who have submitted a statement, is there anything you wish to add? You have 1 minute each. And I believe that's Councillor Pretty, Councillor Craig and Councillor Bicknell.
Yeah.
Councillor Pretty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have a great deal to add to the statement. We are progressing very steadily through the Freeport application. Business plan has been, we've been assured, has been approved. We're now going through methods, statements from understanding from each of the rating authorities to distribution of the retained rates. But apart from that, I think my statement stands. If anybody has any questions to ask me.
Thank you, Councillor Pretty. Councillor Craig or Bicknell, do you have? Councillor Craig?
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any questions on the statements, councillors? In that case, I think we move on to the next item. Councillor House, would you please move that the items listed at section 14 of the agenda be placed before council for noting and questions?
Mr. Mayor, item 11, I think this is, but yes, absolutely happy to.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Corbyn? Are there any questions? No? Thank you, councillors. Councillors, thank you. This now concludes this meeting. The next meeting will take place on Monday, the 27th of February, 2023, back here at King's Community Church. I wish you all a good evening and a very happy and Merry Christmas and great New Year. Thank you.